The luxury car dealership was filled with the hum of expensive engines and the scent of freshly polished leather. Cars lined up like trophies, their sleek bodies reflecting the bright showroom lights. People wandered through the aisles, admiring the cars, but none of them seemed more eager than a young man who had just stepped through the door. His jeans were worn, and his shirt had seen better days, but his eyes sparkled with excitement as he walked past the rows of luxury cars. He had been dreaming of this moment for years, the day he could finally afford a car that matched his ambition. But today was different. Today he was ready to take the next step. A salesman noticed him almost immediately. His suit was sharp, his tie crisp, but his eyes betrayed a hint of arrogance. He had seen people like this before, young dreamers who thought they could afford what they didn't deserve. With a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, the salesman approached the young man. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, his tone laced with condescension. The young man's face lit up. "I've been saving for this day," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "I'm looking at the high-end models." He gestured toward the rows of luxury cars. The salesman raised an eyebrow, taking a step closer. "You're looking at the wrong cars, my friend," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You might want to check out the used car lot down the street. You probably can't afford these." The young man's smile faltered. He had hoped for a better reception, but he wasn't going to back down. "I have enough to make a purchase," he said, his voice steady despite the sting. The salesman scoffed, clearly unimpressed. Sure, but these cars, these are for people who know how to spend their money, not for dreamers who think they're something they're not." He turned to walk away, his dismissive attitude clear. The young man stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been humiliated, but he wouldn't let this moment define him. He would prove this salesman wrong. The salesman walked to the other side of the showroom, shaking his head in amusement. He had seen plenty of hopeful customers walk through these doors, but this one was different. The young man had ambition, but he also had something that the salesman thought was a fatal flaw, a belief that he could fit in with the wealthy elite. But the salesman had learned long ago that people like him didn't belong in places like this. He continued his rounds, greeting clients with a practiced smile, all while keeping one eye on the young man, who stood by himself, clearly uncomfortable but not defeated. Minutes passed, and the young man walked through the aisles again, eyes scanning the high-end cars, his heart aching with the desire to sit behind the wheel of something that matched his dreams. That's when he saw it. A car unlike any other in the showroom. The car was a deep midnight blue, its sleek curves glistening under the lights. It looked like something out of a movie, something that symbolized success. The young man's breath caught in his throat. This was the car he had been dreaming about. Without hesitation, he walked up to the car, his fingers brushing against the cool surface. He glanced over his shoulder to see if anyone was watching. The salesman was talking to a wealthy couple near the entrance, his back turned. A sense of boldness swept over the young man. This was his moment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, quickly dialing a number. The phone rang once before a voice answered. "I'm here," the young man said, his voice steady. "I'm ready to make the purchase." The voice on the other end hesitated for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he replied with confidence, glancing at the car again. "I'll be driving it out of here today." As he ended the call, the salesman turned back toward him, now aware of what was happening. He walked over slowly, his smile returning, but this time with an edge. "You really think you can afford this car?" he asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. The young man didn't flinch. "Yes," he said, looking the salesman directly in the eyes. "I'm buying this car, and I'll show you exactly how." The salesman's eyes narrowed, disbelief written all over his face. He stepped forward, crossing his arms. "I doubt you even have the credit for this, or the money for that matter." This is a car for people who understand what luxury means, not for someone like you." The young man took a deep breath, the sting of the salesman's words still fresh, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek black credit card and placing it on the counter. The salesman raised an eyebrow. "That's cute," he said, mocking the young man's gesture. "But that card won't get you anywhere. This isn't a small purchase." The young man smiled slightly, his confidence unwavering. "Why don't you check it for yourself?" Reluctantly, the salesman took the card and swiped it. The screen on the register blinked for a moment, and then the transaction went through. The salesman's expression shifted from doubt to shock. It went through?" he stammered, staring at the screen. "Yes," the young man said, his voice calm. "I told you I was ready to make the purchase." The salesman stood there for a moment, his face reddening with embarrassment. He had made a snap judgment about the young man based on his appearance, and now he was being proven wrong. But it wasn't just the car, it was everything. The young man had come into the dealership with nothing more than a dream, and now that dream was becoming a reality. The salesman fumbled with the paperwork, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to process the transaction. I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice filled with regret. "I didn't mean to. Well, I didn't know who you were." The young man simply nodded, his face calm, but a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "It's all right," he said. "Not everyone is used to seeing someone like me walking into places like this." The salesman looked down, ashamed of his behavior. "You've shown me something today," he admitted quietly. "I've judged people by their clothes, their appearances. I didn't realize that someone like you could afford such luxury." The young man chuckled softly. "It's not about the clothes. It's about what's inside. People often forget that." As the salesman handed over the keys, the young man felt a wave of pride wash over him. He had done it. He had made the impossible possible. The salesman had underestimated him, and now he was walking away with the car of his dreams. But as he turned to leave, the salesman stopped him. "One last thing," he said. "I apologize for what I said earlier. You've earned this." The young man smiled, his hand on the door handle. "Thank you. But remember next time, don't judge a book by its cover." The young man stepped into the driver's seat of the luxury car, feeling a sense of accomplishment that he had never felt before. As he started the engine, the smooth purr of the motor filled the air. It was a symbol of everything he had worked for, the late nights, the struggles, the sacrifices. As he drove away from the dealership, the world seemed to open up before him. The people who had looked down on him, who had doubted him, now had to face the truth. He had made it, and nothing would stand in his way from here on out. But what mattered most wasn't the car. It wasn't the money. It was the lesson he had learned, and the lesson he had taught others. Never judge someone based on their appearance. As he drove through the city streets, the wind in his hair, he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning.